and you're welcome. In our lesson where we built our basic platformer game, we actually noticed that we could move our platform and apply a little jump. But how does the game object detect another game object? Such that how can it collide with players, how can it collide with obstacles, and so forth. So to do that, we're going to use the collider component. Now the collider component, it defines how the game object shape is used, and it's used for physical collision. Now a collider usually is invisible, and it doesn't have to be, the same size as the game object's mesh, but you can actually make it much more efficient by using basic geometric shapes. So all this is talk. Let's just go down and see the action. So what I'm going to do right now in my scene is to go ahead and create another 3D object. I'll create a cube, and I'll just go back to my scene view, and I'll just make sure this cube is sitting on the exact axis by looking at the transform. So let's just set this value of x to 0, so it'll be on the same axis as our player. And let's go ahead and just drag this cube right here. So if we actually look at this default game object we created, it has a box collider component. If we click down on this box collider component, we can actually increase the size on the x-axis, and we can also increase the height like that, like so, and we can also increase the width of that collider object. Remember, we can have this in 2D and 3D. We're working on a 3D scene, so we have a 3D box collider right here. So basically, this means if I try to walk on my game object, which remember, my object also has a box collider attached to it, it's going to prevent my game object from passing. So let's go ahead and see that. So I'm actually stuck here. I cannot come in contact. Now, on the other hand, if we look at our box collider, let's click on our cube right here, and let's quickly name our cube a detector. And before we go any further, let's go ahead and save our scene as I'll just call it collision detection. So I'll just go to here and I'll do an _13 collision detection. So we don't just override our scene. So we actually have a collision detection scene right here. Perfect. So now a trigger is Unity's scripting. With the scripting system, it can detect when a collision occurs via a function called the onCollisionEnter function. And basically, if we create a game object or a collider and set it to a trigger, whenever a game object passes through that trigger, we can make a lot of things happen. We can play a sound, we can instantiate another game object, we can make things explode, we can create missiles. And to do that, let's just go ahead and set this game object to be a trigger. So now that this game object is a trigger, basically our game object cube is going to pass through that trigger. Now this physics game object is just a system that can detect a collision or an object when it passes through, right? So that's basically what this is for. So let's go ahead and quickly play our scene. And this time around, when we move our game object, we can easily see we're passing through that collider, like so. So in our scene view right here, we're actually passing through this game object. So basically, that's how we can set up the collision system. You can actually make this as large as you want or as little as you want, but remember, they need to be memory efficient. So let's go ahead and see how we can set up the scripting for the collision system, because Unity needs to detect when a character or a player passes through the collider. So we can do that using the on trigger enter. When the collider enters a system, when our player enters this collider, we can use an onExit function, which means our player has exited this game object, and we can use an onTrigger stay, which means this game object is in this trigger. So let's go ahead and quickly see how we can set up this scripting. So to set this up, I'll go ahead and go to my game object, or I'll click on my projects folder and make sure, let's switch back to the 2-column layout because that's the default Unity layout, and I'll select my scripts, and right here I'll right click and I'll create a C# script, and I'll call that detector, just like that. So now that we have our detector script, let's just drag our detector script and drag this to our detector game object. So this is actually loading, so I'll just wait for it a bit to finish loading, and then I can attach this script to our game object. Alright, so let's go ahead and just drag our guy right here and then set that. So we have this detector script on our game object. Now the mesh renderer allows our game object to be viewed in our scene. If we go ahead and turn off the mesh renderer, we won't see the detector game object right there. So just put that in mind, because we don't need to see the object. We just want things to happen when our game object passes through a collider. So, but I'll just leave this open for now. You can turn it off. It don't matter. So what I'll do right now is just quickly open up the detector script by double clicking. Alright, awesome. So now that we have our script, the first thing we're going to do is to actually start our onTriggerEnter function. And to do that, we're just going to go right here and say a void onTriggerEnter, and then we'll pass in the collider object as the first parameter. So we'll say collider, and then we'll use the variable called other. This other will be used to detect which game object is in the scene. So basically what I'm going to do is to do a debug.log, and I'm simply going to say, let's say someone crossed my path, just like that. And let's go ahead and just save that. So let's jump back to Unity, and let's go ahead and play our scene to see if we're going to get any output. So we can see right here on our console, it said someone, let me just go ahead and cross this out. So it says someone crossed my path, and if we go in again, we get that same information, being passed out at different times. So what we can also do is to check if that game object is the player. To do that, let's go ahead and get back to our player, and right here where it says tag, let's set this tag to player. So because we can have other game objects passing through this collider, so let's go ahead and see how we can set that script to check if the player tag is the player, if the object that has passed to the collider is the player. So what we're going to do right now is just use an if statement. So I'll just say if that other dot game object dot tag is equal to the player, and we'll just set that, we'll just set player. So what we're going to do is just to pass our debug.log like so into our player tag. Alright, so what we can also do is to pass in information for our exit. And so if other, and basically what we can also do, oops, I have two of this. So on our onTriggerExit, we can actually set some actions too. So let's go ahead and see how we can set that up for our onTriggerExit. So I'm just going to say void onTriggerExit, and we'll have our collider other, and we'll actually get our game object based on this tag. So let's just get down here and paste this. So we'll just say someone player left, like so. So when it's going out, it's going to say player left. So let's go ahead and jump back to Unity and see if everything is running smoothly. So I'll go ahead and clear my console, and it actually says right here, someone crossed my path, and it says player left. So let's just set this to player. Let's just say player. And also we have the onTriggerStay. So let's go ahead and quickly create that. So we can do a void onTriggerStay. So we'll create our collider, other, and let's just copy this information. Says okay, player is still here, just like that. So let's go ahead and quickly test this. So I'll go ahead and play the scene and clear our console, and let's go ahead and just move in. So it says player is still here, and we're still there, and you can see it's telling us we're still there per second. Each frame it's telling us we're still there, and when we leave it says player left. So that means that's super working. One quick tip is that whenever you pass in a function name that's different from this, your code is going to work fine, but you have errors. For instance, if I change this trigger to a little t, or I make the mistake of setting the name of our stay with an S, or I make any error on naming this, our code is not going to work. So really be very careful about that. So this is quite, we've seen how we can use the trigger, enter, exit, and stay, but how can we use this to actually create something meaningful in our game? So first, let's go ahead and spawn something or instantiate a game object when a player enters our scene. So to do that, let's create an empty game object. So I'll just call that trigger, or I'll just call that spawn. So for spawn, I'll just drag our spawn right here and make sure we're on that same axis. We're not, so let's reset our transform. And let's just drag our game object on the x-axis towards the left, like so. Right, that's okay. And what we can also do is to set a tag. So right here on the shape, let's go ahead and just set this, click on this yellow. We can click any color we want, just to show the position where this game object is going to be created when it's spawned in the scene. And also what I like to do is to add a public game object on our detector script, so we can pass in that detector right here. So let's go back to our script and let's do a public game object. Let's call that the spawn, because we want to spawn that game object in that position. So let's head back to Unity, and under our detector script, if we click on this, we should see an empty slot for our spawn. So let's go ahead and just drag our spawn right here and then pass in our spawn like so. So also what we're going to do is we jump back to our script, and what we're going to do is actually instantiate the object called spawn. So to do so, we're just going to say instantiate the game object, and basically let's instantiate the player prefab. So let's jump into our project and let's go to our prefabs folder, because I want to make this interesting. I want us to have another player right here. So let's jump to our prefabs, and right here on our detector script, let's actually drag our player prefab right here so we can actually have multiple players. And let's change this to a transform. Yeah, so we can actually have a transform we want to instantiate. So this time around, so we're going to instantiate our game object. So let's create that. Let's make this, let's create our public game object. Let's say my object. So let's instantiate the object at that transform. So object, I call this my obj. So my obj at that transform called spawn. I think this will be, I think that's the best thing, that best way to do it. So basically what I'm saying is I'm going to instantiate a game object at that specific transform called spawn. So spawn has a transform component, which is right here. We want to spawn our game object, which is a player prefab right here. So let's go ahead and select our player, and right here, let's go to detector, sorry, and right here it says spawn. Let's go ahead and drag in our transform right here. And for our game object, let's go ahead and drag in our player one prefab, like so. So let's go ahead and save our scene, and let's go ahead and play this. So right now, once we're in, we see we've instantiated another game object, and we can actually go ahead and see these game object right here. We can even jump and do all that stuff. So basically, each time we jump into this scene or go into that spot, it's actually instantiating that game object. So we can do another one like so. Alright, so what we're also going to do is to actually play sort of like an audio whenever we go into that collider, just to make our scene much more interesting. If you're actually okay with this and you're fine, that's perfectly fine, that's okay, but I'll just go ahead and add a little audio. So this is going to be super interesting. So to add our audio, what we need to do is to get our audio source. So let's go ahead and create an audio source right here. So I'll say audio source, and I'll call that source. And then when our game object starts, or when our scene starts, let's go ahead and get that component right here. So source is going to be equal to get component, and the component we're getting is our audio source, like so. So now that we've gotten that audio source, we also need a list of our audio, because I want the game object to play a sound when it goes in, our trigger, and then to play a sound when it exits, our trigger. So to do that, let's go ahead and create a list of an audio clip. So I'll do a public list, and here I'll just do an audio clip, and I'll just create that name. I'll just call it greetings. This will be equal to a new list audio clip, like so. So basically what we need to do right now is to pass our audio clip, and let's go ahead and save that and jump back to Unity. Also, we need to attach an audio source on our spot detector game object. So let's jump back to Unity. So on detector, first let's add an audio source. So I have this audio source, and if we click and drop down, let's get rid of the play on awake, because we don't want this game object to play when it starts abruptly. So what we're also going to do is to open up our greetings and set the size of greetings to 2, because we need 1 audio to play for entering our trigger and 1 audio to play to exit our trigger. And me being a good hip-hop studio person, I'm going ahead and created 2 audio clips, and I'll just import that clip to our scene. So to do that, you can download that from the course project folder, and I actually have it on my desktop right here called sound clips. And basically, if we can just drop this folder right here and just place it in this position, let's just set this here like so. So if we go to our assets folder and go to our sound clips folder, we could just drag these sounds right so, because I've already dragged this, but that's how you can actually drag audio to your game object. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and jump back to Unity and click on our detector game object, and then for the first element we'll do the drag the welcome and place it right here. And then for the goodbye, we're going to drag the element goodbye and place it right here. Also, let's go ahead and go to file and save our project. So let's go ahead and jump back to our scripting environment. So we have our audio source attached, and we've actually imported our audio files, but we're not actually playing that audio file. So to play that audio, let's go ahead and just jump right here to our trigger enter. So right here, let's get our clip, our source clip. So right here we have our audio source. So let's get access to the clip function and load the sound file. So first I'm going to say source dot clip, And this is a default clip to play, and it's going to be equal to our audio clip we called greetings, and we're going to get the first element of greetings, which is simply this game object right here, this one. So element 0 is going to be our welcome, and we access element 0 by passing greetings, which greetings is an audio clip, so the first element of our audio clip list. So that's what's happening right here. And then once we've done that, let's just say our source dot play to play that audio clip like so. So we're going to do the same thing on our onTrigger. Oh, this is our exit, not our enter. So for our exit, we're going to play clip 1. So for our trigger enter, we're going to play clip 0. So let's set this greetings to 0, just like so. So let's save it and head back to Unity and just check to see if everything is super fine. So let's go ahead and play our scene. And when we get in, we actually hear the welcome. When we go out, so the second game object is going in. So right, so that seems to be working super fine. So another thing we could do is to actually hide our mesh like here by clicking on the mesh renderer, so that when we jump to our scene, we could just see that magic occurring. So let's go ahead and move in. Alright, good. So we could actually see we've instantiated 2 game objects at that transform position, and we can actually, if we jump over, you can actually see we have our game objects created. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and see you in the next lesson.